So that concludes the pilot presentations, but I invite all the pilots to come up and participate in our panel Q&A. We have 20 questions queued up from the online audience, and then we'll be selecting some of those to start out with. But are there any questions from the in-person group? Maybe we can kick off. Otherwise,
do you want us to turn these on?
yeah.
Game on.
So I think I'm going to start. So as we've been collecting questions throughout the session, I think I'll start maybe chronologically. So for GSMA, our first question. So once a mobile user is authenticated and in your system, what interfaces can she interact with? Is it a qualifying mobile app, for example? So if you guys don't know, this is Ray Kimball. Ray is fielding Q&A questions on behalf of GSMA.
So I don't have a great answer for this one. I think we're looking at, to address some of the use cases and the specific service providers in phase 2, which will kick off in 1 month from now. So we're fairly new. So unless I'm not understanding the question right, I just don't have a great answer at this point. So, sorry.
That's fair. That's fair. And we have one other GSMA-specific question. Are participating applications like a bank interface going to be required to sign up or qualify with your system? Do they have to pay for higher, I guess, I'm assuming, levels of authentication?
Similar to the previous answer. I wouldn't be comfortable at this point talking about the cost model. We are looking at use cases certainly in the financial sector, and so.
Are there any GSMA specific questions from the live audience? Okay. So moving on to confirm. A question from the online group. Does it matter how big, mature, or complex the signal recipient is? What if they can't consume all of the signals?
I think the short answer to this is, if you're a small to mid-sized signal recipient, come and talk to me, because I'd love to work out what the answer to that is. We're still working out how some of this stuff makes sense. It's pretty clear that we can make a really big impact with the top 1,000 internet sites. We're looking at where do I want to make sure your password is best protected, or your two-factor authenticator most effectively used, or the list goes on and on. We can actually get the 80 to 90% case with probably only about 1,000 sites. We don't want to restrict it to that, and one of the conversations that I noted in one of the working groups that I was in was a very large email provider when I said, hey, what about the process of dealing with this large bank, which has on the order of 50 million identities, just to be clear. And they said, oh, well, we don't want to deal with that number of identities. We only want to deal with the hundreds of millions kind of minimum. I'm much more interested in dealing with numbers that look more like hundreds of thousands of up. Because we're going to have standardized agreements, that lowers the cost, provides a standard way to deal with participation, and creates an easy entry point, hopefully from a legal and participatory perspective. So we think that the answer is that we can deal with a pretty broad range. In terms of consuming all the signals, there is no requirement that a signal recipient consume any particular signal. It's going to depend on your use case, your fraud risk model, your security risk model, whatever it is. So the short answer is you pick and choose what you want based on policy.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. From the live group, we have a question. I need to turn it.
Test. Better? The same question came up for 3 different presentations. Andrew's was the first to trigger it. John hit it. Matt hit it. So I'll ask it now, which is around integration across some of our pilot work. Andrew talked about having yet another trust framework to address the shared signal needs. Fine. Where do I stick that into in common, I was thinking. Then I go, well, maybe John has a trust mark that handles shared signals needs for its stuff. And then Matt mentioned single logout. Right on, man. That's really a hard one. Do you have a trust mark for that? Can we begin? Are we ready to begin to integrate across some of this stuff? You have a single logout trust mark, John? Did I ask?
I'm not sure if we have that particular one, but the framework is built to be extensible, right? So the key for this whole thing is identifying clear requirements that you get agreement on, okay, and then articulating that into the trust mark framework so you can compose that with the other requirements. So we are at the point right now within our framework to, let me give you a perfect example, in the Justice Health example that we explained right there. A lot of the security, privacy, trust, interoperability requirements for that community are already identified in trust mark developments that we've already done. So we would reuse those. There are some clear ones that are missing. I mentioned like informed consent and delegation that for that particular use case are unique. Okay, I imagine the same is with shared signals and all these different environments. I think the important thing is to be able to have a governance and a place where we can start to gather all of these requirements, all of these trust marks. I think the IDESG is a great place to facilitate that so we can figure out where the gaps are and so that we don't get multiple communities of interest, multiple stakeholders, doing exactly what you're alluding to here. So
it would be great if you could consume Andrew's trust framework and spit out a few trust marks.
Be very happy to do that.
Just one minute, I can. In our model, we kind of actually feel like trust frameworks kind of over-grandizing what our description of participation is going to look like, because it's pretty damn simple, frankly. So we have a set of, we have to expect to have statements about limitations on use of information and a bunch of those sorts of things. We're pretty simple when it comes to trust frameworks, so I'm pretty sure those guys can consume us without too many troubles.
Great. Thank you, Ken. For one other one for confirm. How many different signal types are you developing in the short term and possibly long term, and what are some of those examples?
Yeah, we're actively working with a set of folks in this space to determine what makes sense. Over the years, dealing with technology deployments and adoption, I've come to the conclusion that starting off really, really simply is kind of the key. And the one that's most obvious, pretty much to everyone, is the password reset challenge. It's like, is your communication channel going to be a problem? And frankly, if we could just do that one signal, we could actually probably just have massive impact across the internet. We know that the signal types that we're dealing with, I characterized previously, are operational and account level events. That tends to be self-limiting by definition. And as I said, we are dealing with distinct events, not scored expectations on something. So, we take from an account manager a statement about some discrete event. And so that tends, again, to limit you to the sorts of things that are associated with the account manager's operational profile and what they do. We know that there are about 15, 20 use cases that seem pretty much distinct. Some of them cross spaces, some of them are in the mobile operator space, for example, some across mobile and enterprise spaces, but they all tend to be related to particular types of activities related to an account that are going on. So happy to share with anyone the full list. In fact, we'll probably be publishing the expected set of those. But right at the moment, we're focused in the pilot on really 3 events.
Are there any other questions from the live audience for Confirm and Andrew? Okay. Moving on to specific questions for Morpho Trust. Does the state of North Carolina have a sense of how many potential SNAP enrollees have the mobile capabilities to participate in the proofing process?
Well, one of the things we're working on right now is we know that we have a large population of folks that are either applying for the first time or recertifying their way into the FNS program every year. We also know that we have, on average, more than one smartphone device per adult on average around the country. So what we don't have right now is a specific number in the program yet as to how many of the hundreds of thousands of people each year that are applying are going to be able to fit. But when we have done our look across mobile device use, we continue to find a 50-50 split between iOS-based devices and Android devices. So we're trying to see now if we can dig another layer deeper to figure out if there's a slant, within that population towards Android or iOS that is disproportionate than what the larger population has. So that's where we're at right now. But our pilot is fairly modest in its target. We were targeting attracting approximately 1,500 people or more to participate over that pilot operation period. So we're not trying to get hundreds of thousands of people to run to this, but instead be able to use a contained group and prove that it works before we go ahead and try to expand it either in North Carolina to other programs or to other states for the programs that they offer. Anything you'd add to that, David?
Just that, we've sort of modeled out what the drop-offs might be based on technology that people have, and it it's been informative to look at it and see that the technology is available to people who are fit this, and we picked working with SNAP recipients on purpose to sort of make the points about the usability and the pervasiveness, and that the technology does exist and is in the hands of people.
This could be a potential follow-up question to that. What if SNAP applicants do not have a driver's license or record with the DMV? How would the identity verification take place in this pilot?
It wouldn't. So this pilot is very focused. So the population that is applying for benefits, if they happen to have a state-issued driver's license or ID, they're welcome to participate. Right now, the scope of the pilot doesn't address the population that doesn't fall into that category. So it's, if you don't have one of those things, your options are either go get one or, the traditional process that is currently in place today.
To sort of envision some additional ways of people enrolling for these identities. However, for the purposes of the pilot, we were looking at using that because of the trust that's sort of behind it, and demonstrating that we're bringing the value of that identity proofing over into an online identity, being able to use it online.
And I have one other question. This is one question, but it's sort of a train of questions online about what tools exist to check the photo of the driver's license card to the picture of the person. Is that a weak link in the chain?
You want to take a stab at that one, David?
Sure. So I guess I'm kind of looking at tools exist. So in the DMVs have facial recognition technology, and we'll put in one-to-one face matching at the DOT on premises there to run the biometric verification. We'll also do the demographic verification at that point. So tools on the mobile devices are the tools that we have there. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, but the tools we have there are more about coaching the user to take a good self-portrait that would match against the one that's on file at DOT. But part of what we're using as sort of privacy preservation is to take that packet, ship it to the DOT, perform the verification, just return a yes, no, and not be sharing attributes all the way across the system. So I think the tools that exist there are the one-to-one facial recognition that we have installed at North Carolina DOT.
Any other questions for Mofo Trust from the group?
What was it? Where is it?
So from Andrew, I believe the question is there are there liveness capabilities? What if they stick a picture on top of the driver's license?
We owe that guy some money, whoever that is. We gotta
That's
go.
Andrew.
Yeah. Oh, you put that up there yourself. All right, good.
So we're performing that match at the North Carolina Department of Transportation against the one the record on file at DOT, not against the one that's on the physical credential. So that is one option, I think, available to us, is to carve the picture out of the credential and match that. That's not as meaningful as the photo taken at the proofing event, and so we're going to match back to the source there. So I don't think that in addition, I think the document authentication capabilities are another thing that sort of tell you whether the license has been tampered with.
Great. There are a few other questions, but just in order to make sure we get through all the other pilots, I'm just going to jump over to the next presenters. So to GTRI. Are there plans to extend to creating trust marks for people who achieve trainings and certifications, such as nurses, et cetera?
Someone's been reading our mind. That's one of the certain professional certifications that have certain set of requirements. You could imagine a trust mark issued to a person, digitally signed when they meet those requirements under a well-defined assessment process, and then published into a registry. So that you can now have whether it's a state or some certification body that can attest to that professional holding and publish it into a registry that may be outside of their control, but since it's digitally signed, it can carry that consistent meaning. So, yeah.
And also to GTRI. Will your call for participation for trust mark providers include organizations who want to become trust framework providers but aren't quite there yet?
So the answer is yes. I'm just wondering if the question, did they mean for organizations who are not currently trust mark providers or not currently trust framework providers? The answer to that would be yes to either one. A natural role for an existing trust framework provider is to issue trust marks to its members. And the one thing I'm not sure if we mentioned, you don't have to have a full set of trust marks that totally represent your trust framework. You can start off by sticking your toe in the water. Have a particular trust mark for a particular aspect of your trust framework that you issue to your members. I know Ken's in the room here. We've talked about Research and Scholar. They talked about issuing that in the internet too. You can imagine in the health, just informed consent. So we have a consistent understanding of what that is, the process for issuing that, and using that just as one trust mark within a larger trust type of framework. So contact me if you're interested in being a trust mark provider. We're building a set of tools. Within the scope of this pilot, we're going to be putting some tools up as a service in the cloud. And the IDESG Institute is going to be the first one we're going to test drive as an external trust mark provider for the trust mark definitions within the law enforcement space. I'm sure we're going to learn some things from that since it's the first time. But we'd like to have more involved and expand it on out.
I have another question. How would a user know what to participate in a trust mark? What it will mean if they choose one of yours, one with your system?
Okay, so trust marks in our framework are very well defined. Okay, so there's the machine-readable trust marks have a formalized definition that, and as an example, you can go to our website, trustmark.gtri.gov.edu, and you can click on some of the examples there. They have metadata that wraps the trust mark itself, but it has well-defined conformance criteria that need to be met. In addition to that, it has well-defined assessment steps that any assessor must follow in order to assert or issue that trust mark. So they're very well defined. And so this is one of the key things for trust marks. If you're going to make them recognized across silos, you have to have that disclosure in terms of that's consistency, not only in the representation, machine readability of it, but in how you assess and how you assign those as well. So what does a trust mark mean? Every digital instance of a trust mark is sourced back to the definition, which includes the conformance criteria and the assessment process.
John, let me see if I can try to rephrase this. I think I know what they're trying to ask. Are trust marks that are envisioned as part of the GTI project, are they more consumable by the end user themselves, or are they more consumable by the organizations who rely on such identity assertions?
Okay, so the ones that we've worked on right now are more consumable by the organizations, the identity providers, the reliant parties, the attribute providers, and so forth. With that said, we did a little experiment on some privacy type of trust marks and with some a plug-in to a browser where you can set the kinds of trust marks that are required by a user policy, almost like UMA, and those trust marks will have to be present in that website, and if not, then you get the big red X and so forth. So you can extend them to the users in terms of their consumption of those. Right now, the primary focus has been at the organizational level.
Thanks. Question from Ken?
I just wanted to interject some international thoughts here that have been triggered by various comments. When John mentioned the RNS mark, we went through a process of internationalizing it over the last year, and it was grievous. We're through it. We're able to have it. We have an international mark. You can get through it. But I just offer up that we want to have at least some international thoughts a priori about some of the marks that we might be developing, less maybe in the operational sense, more in the privacy sense, but wherever they are, let's give some thought to that. When Andrew was talking about his set of events, I was hearing an international registry that might want to, just catalog events so that we don't duplicate them, et cetera. So let's make sure that we're thinking in those dimensions as we go forward.
So Ken, just to that, we've been actively working in the UK on a totally distinct and separate pilot, and so we're aware of some crossover that's about. It's like we're right on the edge of needing to do that. So happy to have your assistance.
I just want to add another thing, and Mary brings up a great point. I mean, really, it comes down to marketing and market education or consumer education around what the trust marks mean. Proliferating these trust marks into the market as well, where people are seeing them and trusting them. But just because we produce a trust mark here, if we just make a trust mark that nobody understands what it means, then we're not doing anyone service. That's why we have a comms team. We're going to work on branding around the trust mark and a plan to educate the market on what it means before they get to an identity service where they see that trust mark for the first time.
So this is a bit of a follow-on question. So the idea of componentized trust marks seem to jive close to what the IDESG wants to do with the identity ecosystem framework. Can GTRI be the first pilot for the identity ecosystem framework we are building?
I think that makes a lot of sense. In terms of, I feel like we are already piloting a lot of the concepts. When we first went into this, although it was a law enforcement context, we went into this believing in the principles of NSTIC. We went in this from a ecosystem perspective. So our solutions from day one were trying to transcend. So our federation, which was law enforcement, is no longer going to be branded as law enforcement. That's why we're starting to bring in mental health and substance abuse. We've got a registry, and that registry will hold the trust marks not only for the law enforcement participants, but for any participant that wants to produce and publish their trust marks into that. That could evolve into an IDESG type of registry. I would hope that IDESG at some point in time does have a registry that can hold trust marks and trust mark definitions and endpoints for all different communities of interest, and that the work of those communities of interest in terms of building their definitions and building on the core or baseline trust marks happens in this group. This becomes that governance body.
John, any other questions for John and GTRI? So moving on to ID.me. From the online group, are you looking to move beyond password-based credentials?
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at moving beyond password-based credentials. We agree that nobody likes passwords, right? But again, it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, we're looking at a number of different authentication factors. There's a whole market of them out there, right? There's a ton of different stuff we're looking at. So, I mean, yes.
And I believe for the person who's asking, I believe ID.me is certified up through level 3 as well, which would include a multi-factor capability. Another question from the online group. Have you considered creating toolkits that are integrated with popular platforms and releasing them for no charge?
Yeah, we have created toolkits for, again, we started in the commercial retail space because that was where we started and started driving adoption of our credentials. And we built plugins or toolkits, whatever you want to refer to them as, that are available for no charge to those organizations. And we're building more. I mean, we absolutely want to be an application that's available in Salesforce's platform. We're working to that, and other large platforms to provide those RPs with a NSTIC aligned option.
Are there any ID.me specific questions from the group? Are there any general questions from the group to any of the pilot presenters? So we have a few minutes left, and there are some other specific questions. I guess I can link back up to GSMA. What regulatory issues do you anticipate moving from non-US to US jurisdictions?
These questions are great. So this is a U.S.-based pilot, first of all. So the regulatory issues that we're going to consider and manage to are U.S. based, and we're looking at, and specifically market. So some of the use cases we've discussed are around healthcare and financial, and obviously there are regulations and privacy considerations that are unique to each that we have to address. and that will be a challenge. So.
Thanks, Ray. Yes, these are difficult questions, especially for GSMA, so appreciate you sharing what you can. We have about 5 minutes left, so there is one overall question that was submitted, and maybe we can start with you, Ray. And I know we're just starting on your pilot, but if we could just go through the different ones. What is the single greatest challenge you've encountered during your pilot so far? How have you overcome this obstacle?
Sure. I think probably the number one most challenging issue that we've come across, the pilot scope is quite ambitious, and we're working with 4 of the U.S. mobile network operators. And so I would say just alignment across the business concerns with all the MNOs and making sure that we're developing something that they are bought into that also aspires to the NSTIC principles. So I think in this early stage, it's been a lot of conversations with just aligning the stakeholder groups that we're involved with right now. So.
Thanks, Ray.
So I think we sort of discussed which one is our biggest challenge.
We had the caucus up here. We had to negotiate it.
You know, I think at registration time, performing the match, the biometric match back at the DOT and getting a good quality photo, I think we see that technologically in coaching the users and as one of the biggest challenges. But I also think that it's going to be an opportunity for us because we want to be able to publish statistics of what we found in the pilot. If you do, there's other identity proofing methods that are out there that people are using now, and they have turnaway rates and success rates. And we would like to be able to work the technology well enough that and then at the end of the pilot, publish our rates to say, if you want to perform a biometric match to that identity proof, we can compare it favorably, or we can compare it to the other methods that are out there for performing or tying to an identity proof.
We're going to cheat because there's 2 of us, but there's another one that's not insignificant in that it could be confusing to people to see that they initiate the process using their state-issued driver's license, but then actually the EID that's issued is actually being issued by MorphoTrust. So we're the IDP there. So that's important for a couple of reasons. One is that people should know who's issuing the credential to them, but we also don't want the individual to feel somehow big brothered, right? That somehow this is a government-issued credential, and therefore, what I'm doing online and where I choose to go and purchase and do with this thing in the future is somehow under the purview of the government. It's going to be important that we try to make that really clear for people and make it simple so they get it from the very get-go.
Since these guys had 2 and they just started, I'm going to my first one is balancing. I've got more than 3, but is balancing kind of all the reporting requirements and meetings that pilots have with getting shit done, and we've overcome that largely just by sleeping less. But on a serious note. Now, on a more serious note, I think, balancing some of the changes that we've made that have been, I'll call it inspired by the NPO or different subcommittees, has had real trade-offs in user experience, conversion rates, and, we've overcome those by doing the things that make the most business sense, doing the things that align us the most with NSTIC, and being flexible in the way that we're open to testing and trying things to make sure that we are aligned to NSTIC. So I just want, I point that out because as we make these requirements, people have to remember their trade-offs associated with that. And if we want to have identity solutions in the market that align with NSTIC, it's not a not-for-profit model, and NSTIC funding isn't going to be there forever. So, we have to think about those things and trade-offs that we make in order to provide these solutions into the market and how we can advance those over time instead of, shifting completely one way or the other right off the bat.
So mine's probably a little different. This, like almost every market technology that I've launched over quite a number of them, I'm having the same challenge as always when you introduce something new and its assumptions. Every time we use a term or make a statement, we find that somebody's gone off in an arc where we say, whoa, you need to come all the way back here because that's actually nothing like what's going on here. And just as by way of one early example, I had one guy say, we don't actually need any of this stuff that you're doing because with multi-factor authenticators and FIDO, they will solve all of these problems. At which point I paused and looked at this guy and said, well, that's fine right up until the point that your authenticator drops out of your back pocket into the toilet, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be using an email channel to actually request the new one. So I think we're still exposed in a few areas.
So I think from our perspective is we have a complex problem. So it's inherently complex, and trying to communicate that in a simple way so that it resonates with folks, so they could get on board, and also the proliferation of trust frameworks and rule sets that are out there that are complex, overlapping, different rice bowls, all of those kinds of things, because that takes not only the technology piece, it takes the people piece in there. In order to solve this, we're going to have to solve both of those problems so we can factor out common things and reuse and reduce the duplication and then make it all simple so that it works.
Thanks, Sean, and thank you all for participating in this session, and thank you for the pilot presenters.